All right, so just another half a second here. And
we'll do a countdown. We'll go a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And Sarah, go to your next slide now.
Well, the next slide is also a Slido. So folks, if you could just take a second, and the question for you right now is, what brought you to the sector and what keeps you here? So all of us today are here. We belong to what we call the employment services sector. Why are you here? What brought you to the sector? Very, very few people, when you had to, do those cardboard cutouts and drawings in grade 4 to say, what do I want to be when I grow up? Very few of us said, I really want to be a job developer. I want to be an employment counselor. Now, I kind of did. I was 13 years old and typing resumes because my mother was an executive director of a center. So if we can just mute all of the other lines, that would be great. Folks, mute your lines for us.
Yeah, got it.
All right. So we've got, lots of people. I love this. An accident brought me here. It's the people that keep me here. Supporting youth to maximize potential, positive change, happenstance, meaningful position. It allows me for advocacy, helping other people. So you can see helping out people is growing, right? Helping people, lots of that. And what you find, Angela and I, as we have gone across the country and even sometimes internationally and talked about this, very rarely do people ever say, in fact, I don't think it's ever happened, Angela, where people say, I chose this field to get disgustingly wealthy.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that there.
No.
I'm looking also in the chat and I'm looking there. I'm seeing happenstance. I'm not seeing wealthy.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So it's purpose is often what brings us here and keeps us here, right? Lots of the words around, happiness and passion, rewarding and individuals, families, people, etc. So this is very, very common. So Paula, we just wanted to do just a quick start to see why is it that folks are here. So just another couple of seconds, folks. We'll count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'm going to hand it over to Paula.
Awesome.
Do we have Paula? There you are.
Yeah, thank you so much. So on behalf of the Canadian Council for Career Development, I'm thrilled and honored to be able to welcome Sarah and Angela to present this webinar for us today. And wonderful, I'm just looking up, I see 310 people participating on the Zoom currently, and the numbers are growing, so that's awesome. So I'd love to be able to introduce Sarah and Angela for you. For decades, Sarah and Angela have inspired critical thinking and action in the employment services sector. Angela has 34 years in the sector and Sarah has 27. Both have been practitioners, program managers, and program directors. They've spent the last 2 decades as consultants to the sector, covering all levels of government and all job-seeking populations. They're widely recognized as experts in program design and delivery for marginalized populations, as well as performance measurement and management of the sector. They both have a very deep understanding and passion for the tough outcome-based competitive environments of the employment services sector, as well as expertise in the data and evaluation systems around them. This is something that's very near and dear to them. I'm thrilled that they've written a book about it and that they're hosting conversations about it. And I'm really looking forward to the conversations that we're going to be having today. Thank you, Angela and Sarah.
Thank you, Paula, so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to get started with another Slido. If folks could just take a moment. So what we know is that across the globe, governments invest billions upon billions, and this is very intentional, many billions of dollars into the employment services sector. 1 to 3 words. Why do they do that?
I'm just putting that, the link, the Slido link also in the chat, and the codes #smoke. And as you're seeing words that are popping up on the screen, and I see people are doing it in the chat as well, so I'm watching both. But if there are words that are popping up that you're saying, like, look what just happened to economic growth. So if there's words that pop up and you want to see them bigger, then you can add them again. If some of those resonate with you, and I'm also looking in the chat, economic growth, GDP.
Lots about that. Lots about
to show they're
growth.
doing something. Yeah.
More to taxpayers, stimulate the economy, justify their spending, to increase taxes. Employed people are happier, right? Inertia,
Yes.
investment, build strong communities. For those of you that are just joining us, you can use your phone and use your camera setting and go on the QR code that's on the screen, and that will take you to Slido. So we've still got at least 25 people that are continuing to message us. We've got 90 folks that are joined us in Slido. Anyone else that wants to join us using your phone, you can. You can also use the chat box. So you can see economy is over there, is coming over again. Then we see some words like they move. It's hard to moving targets, but about
Yes.
combating. Not converting, was something about diversity, right? Reactive response. I saw socioeconomic health, etc., stimulating the economy, politics, etc. So there's lots and lots of reasons on why people. Why governments are investing billions of dollars into the employment services sector. And so when we started talking to Paula and the CCCD about our book and having something like this, one of the things that we said is, well, what's our role in the future? What's our role in the future of Canada? So just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to come off Slido and take us to another slide that talks about that. We're going to talk a little bit about our role in the future of Canada. Now, a couple of maybe a month and a half ago, Angela and I were at a policy conference with Queen's University and the University of Toronto. And there was this woman who was a keynote who's absolutely brilliant, Minouche Shafik, if I'm saying her name correctly, and her book is What We Owe Each Other, A New Social Contract for a Better Society. Cannot recommend this book enough. Got home, bought it, read it, brilliant. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that social contract is that we have with each other, but Manoush goes into much greater detail about how we actually need to rewrite that contract now because it's failing us in a lot of ways. But one of the things that she talks about is that government doesn't actually pay for things. They do not pay for things. They invest in things. And that when we are young, part of the social contract is that we are recipients. The government covers us in our K to 12. We invest in our education so that folks can, jump into the labor market and become the middle. And in the middle, we are contributors. As we are contributors, we are investing into the piggy bank, right? At some point, we step out of that and we move into another form of becoming a recipient, which in the social contract, they call it the old, which is healthcare and long-term care. We become recipients. It's always been the case that health and long-term care costs more, but there's something very dramatic that's not just happening in Canada, it's happening across the planet, some countries more than others. Japan is struggling with it the most, but we are as well. And what that is that Canada is facing record retirements from an aging labor force. So according to StatsCan, by 2036, 25% of Canadians are going to be over the age of 65. So think about that. 1 in 4 people are going to be over the age of 65. When the retirement age was set at 65, the life expectancy was only a couple of years beyond that. What we know now is that the life expectancy is just under 83 years of age, meaning that we went from a couple of years as a recipient to upwards of 18 years as a recipient. Right? So really think about that. Over the next 30 years, the number of persons aged 85 and older could triple from just under 900,000 to 2.7 million people over the age. And this is in Canada. This is Stats Canada data. And they say that even a large-scale immigration strategy is not going to be enough to soften the blow of our aging workforce. The number of seniors aged 65 plus is growing 6 times faster than children 0 to 14. Now, 0 to 14, right? This is where we are clearly in, again, we're in that dependent side of the equation. But it's interesting to know that in 1966, there were 2 people aged 15 to 24 for every person working. Right? For every Canadian aged 55 to 64. So 15 to 24 working age folks. So with Canadians 85 to 64 in 2021, it's 0.8 to 1. We're seeing a flip. And Angela, I wish I had that slide. At the conference we were at, there was an economist who spoke, and it was so simple. And I don't even remember the math entirely, but it was like what it is right now is that we have like 2 workers for a senior, right? And we're not that far away where that's going to flip, that there will be more people not working than working. So you can imagine that this is going to present a really big problem for us. In the 2022 Canadian federal budget. This is on slide 25, on page 25 of the federal budget, folks. So look it up. We're dead last. The prediction for Canada, that 2020 to 2026, they're looking at all of the countries, the real GDP per capita, their potential annual growth. Canada is predicted to be dead last. And this is in our federal budget. Now, I love listening to economists and people that can really unpack all of this stuff, but just kind of in a simplistic form to really understand what this is about, there are 2 components that they look at. So one is they call labor productivity. Labor productivity is growth in output per hour worked. So growth in output, so output and productivity per hour worked. The second thing that they look at is growth in hours worked per head of the population. So for the number of bodies that you have in your country, how many hours are working per head? It's important to know that of the 2 components, it's actually this first one that is they view to be the more important of the 2, because it's actually unlimited. There's no ceiling on this, because it is really about technological change and businesses' ability to adapt and workers' ability to adapt. Think upskilling, right? Think new starts, new businesses, new innovations, technologies, etc. Right? So there is no real ceiling here, but on this one, on labor utilization, there is a ceiling, because your ceiling is based on demographics, it's based on workforce participation, and there's really only so many hours that people can work or will work in a year. So we don't have this one set up as a Slido, but I'd love you to take a moment and jump on the chat and think about, how does our sector, the employment services sector, connect to both labor productivity and labor utilization? So think about productivity again is how we get more productivity for the hours that we work. We see that a lot is about technology, innovation, etc. Utilization is the number of hours worked. So Angela, I don't have my chat up. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what you're seeing from people.
Valerie said, who says they're not allowed? We are not using the skills that newcomers bring.
Yeah.
That's all we have so far. So
we could get all kinds of policy conversations around all of these things, right? And that was actually the policy conference we went to. It's about the future of work in Canada, right? Like how do we contribute? But even as, like, when we think about it as a sector, but you can even think about it in your job. If you are a job developer, or you are a career counselor at a high school or a college, right? Or if you are an organization supporting persons with disability, or newcomers, or Indigenous populations, what role do you play, right? Mm-hmm. And when we talk about our role in the future of Canada and how important we are, this is really, really key. Angela, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay. So really, this is actually a really nice segue. And as I see some of the comments coming up in the chat, just around newcomers and person with disabilities, senior workers, that sort of thing. So what's really interesting is that companies, and this is from a report from the Harvard Business School called Hidden Workers, Untapped Talent, great article. And so what they say in that is companies are increasingly desperate for workers, yet and an enormous and growing group of people are unemployed or underemployed, eager to get a job or increase their working hours. Yet companies are consistently bemoan their inability to find talent, while millions remain on the fringes of the workforce. This is a US report, and actually it's not US, it was a few countries. It didn't talk about Canada, but we know this is a common issue across the globe. Sarah? So hidden workers, who are they? They are people you see every day that you said in the chat: immigrants, refugees, older workers, racialized youth, people with disabilities and neurodiversities, people with mental health issues, people with criminal histories, people without traditional qualifications, etc., etc. They want to work. They are actively seeking work, and they are distressed. You can go next, Sarah. They are distressed and discouraged, especially when their regular efforts to seek employment consistently fail due to hiring processes that focus on what they don't have, such as credentials, rather than what the value that they bring, such as capabilities. So they're tired, and they are, it's not that they're not looking for work. It's not that they want to remain hidden, far from that. Sarah. So this great report, and I think Serena Hopkins and maybe Paula and maybe others were involved in this OECD report, the career guidance for adults in Canada, that is available on the line. Not enough people even know where services are. So interesting that 19 in this paper, 19% of Canadians used a career service over the past 5 years. It's half of the OECD average, other countries in OECD. As far as upskilling and retaining, again, only 19% of Canadians are seeking guidance from those services when they're choosing a field of study, compared to 31% of the OECD average. And who are these people? They find is the people that aren't using them are people that are low educated, older adults, often in rural areas, and they're even less likely to use services. So these people aren't using the services, and they're even less likely when they have higher intersecting barriers. So imagine Indigenous persons or racialized persons, and there's a higher risk for them of obsolescence, especially when you look at the older adults with AI and job automation. And Sarah, I just want to say something with this too, because in that hidden workers, untapped talent, they talked about the percentage of people that used career centers like those we have in Canada. They said 35% of the population they had used services, but only 26% of employers prioritize them. And this is a really great opportunity, I think, in dealing with that labor utilization, that when you look at this sector, the employment services sector, there's a lot of people not using services that are out there. They're hidden, they're frustrated, they're discouraged. And then we say, what about employers? Are they looking at services, employment services, as a place to go for talent and untapped talent? So there's a great opportunity here.
And I think it's worth saying, Angela, that the billions and billions of dollars that are invested into our sector, I've often said it's like we're the foot soldiers in this, right? That we have an issue with labor utilization. We have an issue in productivity and upskilling and retraining and so on. And we pour billions of dollars into this. And our roles are unbelievably important. So we wrote a book, and we've been asked several times, right? Why did you write this book? What is it that you gals stand for? And, Angela and I, as consultants over the years, have spent a whole lot of time helping people facilitate their business planning and writing vision, mission, vision statements and all that stuff. So we sat down and we said, we should come up with our principles, our values. And we spent so much time with it. And we said, you know what? We actually believe in what the sector already promises. The sector promises a lot. And what we believe is that every government-funded employment program already has worthy goals towards meaningful, gainful, sustainable employment, anchored in equity, diversity, belonging, sustainability, inclusion, and any other worthy aspiration. And we don't say that flippantly, any other worthy aspiration you want to add. These are really important words to our sector, right? But these are the things that anchor us. They're the things that we promise. These are the promises that we've made to job seekers, to employers, and to communities. And what we believe is that simply we actually just all need to deliver on the promises. Can we deliver on these promises? And when we say all, It's everybody. The book doesn't pick on any one person. We're picking on everybody. We're all in the soup. We're all complicit. We all play a role, and all includes government, politicians, bureaucrats, service providers, education, academia, industry, evaluators, sector-specific associations, consultants, all of us. We all contribute to the promise and what we wanted to achieve with this book. And Angela and I and Paula and Serena and all of the associations across the provinces, et cetera, we can't do this alone. But what is it that we want to achieve with having written the book? We want to achieve conversation and action. So the first step is about initiating and facilitating a brave, honest dialogue about the state of the sector, the whole sector. We don't want to facilitate anything that's going to be about griping about a funder or a program design or an outcome model or a funding framework. We want to have a dialogue about the promise. We need to create a safe space for having these really candid conversations, using shared language that validates the current experience and leads people to hope. And lastly, how do we make it even just a little bit better? Right? How can we help create tools and practical resources to forward action, allowing the sector to make sustainable changes to get to the core wound? Now, we haven't talked about the core wound yet, right? How do we get to a core wound so that we can enable the promise? There are 3 questions that we are going to ask you, pushing to the end of our time with you. One, on a scale of 1 to 10. How big do you think the illusion is within the employment services sector? And I get we haven't yet talked about the illusion.
Yeah, don't answer the question
Don't
yet.
answer it
We'll
yet.
get there.
We're going to get there. On a scale of 1 to 10, how ready is our sector to talk about this problem? And what do you think would need to happen to increase our readiness? All right, so we're now going to talk about the book. What is this all about? So on to the book, a little bit of an advisory. The following presentation does contain some coarse language. Some participants might find the content controversial yet thought-provoking. It is controversial. It is intended to be thought-provoking. Participant discretion is advised. As we have already said, we have a problem. We have this massive problem, and it's globally massive. And simply put, it is that some people who want to work and can work are not working, even if the jobs are there. Now, across provinces and across the world, there are so many different designs of employment programs, employment policy, etc. Not almost, all of them have some version of differentiating job seekers from one another. And this is not intended to label people, right? But it's about distance from the labor market. So in the book, we have come up with our own kind of model. Here in Ontario, we're just about to go through transition or going through transition yet again. We have A stream, B stream, and C stream clients. Right? So in your provinces, you have different ways of streaming clients, but it's about distance from the labor market. What we touched on is that the suns and the stars, they're the easiest to get into the market, right? They're the closest to the market. They're the folks that employers, they want, when they hit your job developers, they want you to just give them piles of these really, really shiny self-marketing clients, right? Those are not the folks that our programs are designed for. Government-funded programs are typically for folks that we've called moons, half moons, and clouds, that are further removed, facing barriers, have a much more difficult time accessing the labor market. So when we talk about those folks who our programs are designed for, in the book, we want to talk about this because despite the billions invested, it isn't working. We wrote the book because we believe that the employment systems and the solutions that have been created, that we call the employment services sector, is largely broken. There's far too much money being spent and far too many players involved in what is essentially window dressing. Remember, I said there was going to be some controversial and provocative comments here. This is one of them. Ouch, ouch. It looks like we have a solution, but in practice, the most vulnerable people continue to be left behind. And we know that it's not just Angela and I that feel this way. In fact, was it October 6th? The minister here in Ontario tweeted, the Ontario Employment Services Program is broken. Our minister on Twitter. Did I get that right, Ange? Right?
Yes,
broken.
On Twitter, on LinkedIn. Sorry,
on LinkedIn, right? So and evaluation after evaluation continues to say these folks are being left behind. We're not making meaningful change. Now, really important wide sweeping disclaimer. In saying that things are broken, we're not saying that everything is broken. We know that some things are working some of the time. We've seen it. We now have hundreds and hundreds of people online from across Canada and beyond. And man, we do brilliant things. Man, we accomplish fantastic things every single day. But the problem is the things that are working, they're not systemic. They're not scaled up. They're not sustainable. They're not resulting in transformative and significant results to the populations of people who we are concerned about. And we welcome the opportunity to review any research that can demonstrate otherwise. When we go in and work with organizations, and Angela and I, throughout the decades have been hired by funders, by the policymakers, by the organizations. We've done extensive training across the board. And often what we see is people drowning in what we call a survival culture, that we are driven to tell the story that the funders need to hear in order to keep our funding. Performance is measured, tracked, and scored to death. Now, I am a big believer in outcome-based performance measurement. So this isn't me, pooping all over all performance measurements and management. I am a very big believer in this. I'm an expert in it. It's what I do. But there's a dark side to performance measurement that this is part of the honest dialogue. Very rarely are program values, principles, quality, and long-term outcomes measured. We're starting to see some switches there, but even as that changes, right, there's always other effects that happen. We see ever-increasing caseloads, onerous and controlling paperwork, restrictive operating dollars, expanding rules, regulations, and restrictions. We also survival culture, sometimes it drives into a fear-based culture. And Timothy Galloway in The Inner Game of Work did a really great explanation of this fear-based culture. In a fear-based culture, the desire to look good or to not look bad can take precedence over the business objectives at hand. Fear creates interference, which prevents people and organization from reaching their full potential. So in the book, we talk about the first one, we talk about the fear-based work cultures, and we talk about this concept of hitting the targets, missing the point. I'm a data geek. I spend hours upon hours upon hours in the data systems behind these employment programs, not just at the level that goes into the government reports, right? The monthly reports or your quarterly reports, et cetera, but right down into the level of operational detail. And often what we see is that, yeah, we can hit the targets. It looks like we're achieving it, but the data underneath the waterline shows that the most vulnerable job seekers continue to be left behind, right? And these folks are the intended benefactors of these government programs. So we can achieve, 80% employed outcomes for our folks, but when you look, that 80% is not including the persons with disability, the newcomer, the racialized persons, et cetera, the person that's on Ontario Works or on welfare and has not been able to get into the market for a decade. Those folks are still largely being left behind. So back to your Slido. We've got hundreds of folks in the room. Do you see this as well? So do you see the fear-based cultures, the survival culture, the hitting the targets, missing the point? What do you see? I'm going to take a quick sip of my water while we're seeing what people have to say on this one.
And Sarah, as we're going through the next part of the presentation, we're going to be moving really quickly through these Slidos. So people, if you don't have it set up yet, slido.com, #smoke, or you can use the QR code. And if I know some people are calling in or you can't get online to Slido, I'll be looking at the chat, but we're seeing, you're missing LOLs, Sarah, on this in the chat, but the absolutelys, and talking, someone just said about service provider competition. So we've got a lot of really good comments coming up there, and I love the here's that are happening. So yeah,
we've got 143 people so far on the poll with a 90% absolutely, right? So this is part of what we're hoping for in this, is that because this is coming from across Canada now. This isn't a local problem. This isn't just in our organization. Right. So we're seeing this fear-based survival culture, this pattern of hitting the targets, missing the point. So just another 5 seconds, folks. to get your thoughts in either through chat or through this active poll. But this is, of course, I mean, can you imagine, Angela, if we kind of did this launch, then it was like 90% no?
Yeah,
Nope. What do you gals?
exactly.
What do you people say?
Yes,
No, no, no.
exactly.
Yeah, no, we're all seeing it. We're
Yeah.
all seeing it. We're at 91% now with 170 people having voted from across Canada. So I'm going to keep us moving. Yes, that is a cow and a bull with poop. So there's a whole section in the book that we call BS survival practices. I'm going to talk about why we have this BS survival practices, but so much of it is that we are so driven to tell the performance story. I was working with an organization recently where they're supposed to be working with really marginalized people. They've got caseloads of 200 folks who are very, very marginalized, and they're supposed to achieve these really great results. How do you do it, right? Well, there are ways, without a doubt, right? And you know, hopefully that'll be part of the dialogue and the discussion is the best practice and how we do this. But sometimes what we fall back on, and we've seen this, Angela and I have collected these over the decades, these BS survival practices. And what they are ways of gaming, creaming, and parking in the system. And we see this. There's no particular program, no particular funder, no particular province. It happens everywhere, right? So we've lumped it into 4 categories in the book. We're not going into them, but they've got cutie little graphics next to each one of them with a description in the book. BS client intake. What? You want me to open another 300 people in the next 2 months? Okay. These are some of the things that get involved. Is like, quick, open, we need to open, folks. So donut coffee intake, tombstone, bait and capture, leapfrog, washroom intake, strategic pulse, lucrative loiterers. They all have different descriptions, right? You want me to open people? I'll make that happen. The BS non-intake. The non-intake is about creaming, right? Oh, this person just walked in the door. It's going to be really hard for me to achieve my 75% employed outcome at 3-month follow-up with this person. So I am saying, you know what? There's an organization down the street that specializes in working with people with disability, working with Indigenous persons, working with older workers, blah, 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 fill it in the blank. You're better off to go down there. So that's the specialized non-intake, which ultimately becomes creaming. We have another one around policy rejection. The other thing we get from government is spend your money, especially near the end of the fiscal year. Holy heck, get that money spent. We don't want that money back. Spend it, spend it, spend it. Okay, how fast do you want me to spend it, right? Fill the orders, corporate welfare, best friend employers, private membership placements. These are things that we see in the world of job development often, where we are doing wage subsidies or various things that are flow-through funds, where the government wants our flow-through funds. And this is the hitting the target, missing the point. Our government invested millions of dollars, you know, infused millions into the labor market. And it's like, you know, did we really? The BS employment outcomes. Depending on where you are in the country, some of your employment programs already make it mandatory that they're only counting a job, an outcome, if you have a pay stub or a letter of hire or letter, right? So, but oftentimes it's not. People just say employed. Well, when we see those types of environments, these are some of the things that Angela and I have seen and talk about. So the missed phone call job, the sneeze job, the snow job, the process park and play, spaghetti job, slide, all of these have descriptions in the book. Again, like you can imagine, we could spend 2 hours just going through these, but they're practices that, and it's language I often hear where managers say, okay, you know, Angela, we need to have another 17 employed outcomes in the next week, right? What are my quick wins? Give me my quick wins. Right? Well, man, when we're focusing on those quick wins, guess what we're not focusing on? This isn't just an us problem, and it's not just a right now problem. So the OECD in 2005, their employment outlook report had a very, very powerful couple of sentences in it. It was talking about the employment services sector across the planet. And in it, they talked about arrangements must prevent gaming, which is the artificial manipulation of those outcomes, and creaming, failure to enroll those disadvantaged clients. You Google search gaming, creaming, and parking in the employment services sector, you will find stuff from all over the planet. This is not new, and this is not just us. So another quick Slido. And we have to move these quite quickly. So get ready on your phones or in the chat. On a scale of 1 to 10, does gaming, parking, or creaming, or some other BS practice show up in your reality? So on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 is, are you guys like hiding in my office, right? Do you see all this? Like absolutely 100% this is happening. 1 is the opposite, which is maybe it's happening somewhere, but it's not happening here. All right. So give me a sense on a scale of 1 to 10, how much is this showing up in your reality right now? And again, we're coming from all across the sector, right? We have government funded providers, we have profit, not for profit, we've got colleges, we have academia, right? We have folks from all over the place.
Funders.
Funders, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And just so you know, with Slido, when you're completing Slido, it is anonymous. People are putting in the chat, sir, as we're seeing 7s, 8s, 9s. There, someone said, saw it all in my 15 years in employment. LOL.
Mm-hmm.
Duplication of services, so prevalent.
So far, we're about 60%, 7% or higher. So we've had about 164 folks so far, right? So, you know, it's wonderful. There's lots that I see that's wonderful in this. One is, again, you know, I'm very hopeful that we can all find some validation in knowing that it's not just me, and it's not just my program, and it's not just my manager or my fund or whatever. We have the systemic issue, right? And wouldn't it be wonderful? There's, you know, about 20% of folks that are 5 or lower. What's going on there? Is there something that we could mine, something that we could learn?
Yeah.
Right? So there's a lot of really neat stuff. Our average score right now is 7.1. All right, I'm going to keep us moving, Ange.
Yeah.
Why? What are the root causes of this illusion? So there are 6 causes that we outline in the book. I'm going to have to go through them fairly quickly. I'm hoping that at this very high level that you will get the gist of the cause that we are talking about. When I'm done each cause, I'm going to ask you on a scale of 1 to 5 how much you can relate to this, right? Does this seem like it's something that happens in your community or not? On a scale of 1 to 5, 5 is high. So root causes of the illusion. The first cause is about government sound bites trump service excellence. So this is programming by election promise. So it appears to be the expectation, say, that if a government elected official publicly announces a shiny new program on a Monday, that service providers are going to have it up and running by Tuesday, and they will have a positive performance report by Friday, right? Some of you have lived in that world where it's like, oh, we have a new program, right? Very rarely, right, is it supported with the kinds of things that we want to see. So this programming by election promise, they're announced with a whole lot of fanfare, and it's aligned to those election cycles. But the untested, they often come with untested program policy without the benefit of pilots. They're not supported with well-developed policy or meaningful training. They're developed often without input from the service providers. And Angela and I have many times tried to advocate that service providers, nobody that knows the job seeker and the employers better than the on-the-ground service providers, right? What role are they playing in the development of these policies? Oftentimes they're launched and they're not even considering the best practice research. We've seen it where governments have paid for the research and then completely ignored it when they launched that next program. The problem is when a program is launched poorly, it often results in poor results and in gaming. We waste millions of dollars due to a failed launch. What will often happen is an evaluator, the auditor, will get a hold of a program and it will get absolutely slammed, and the government will have to make all kinds of policy changes, etc. Sometimes it just falls from the public eye and they start tweaking the program, making changes. And then sometimes it just gets discarded. We throw the baby out with the bathwater, and, especially if there's a change in government, and then we blame the last government for the failure of this program, etc., etc. But so this is the first cause, is around this programming by election promise. Of course, employment is one of the most powerful program election promises that there is, because it's connected to everything, to health, to housing, to childcare, to everything, right? So it's a really big piece. So quickly on your Slido, Do you see government sound bites trumping service excellence as a problem in our sector?
1, not really. 5, absolutely.
All right, keep it coming. I'd love to.
And we're seeing 5s in the chat, Sarah.
So again, it's not that we're picking on anybody in all of this, right? There isn't any one person that we're pointing at and blaming, but this is, and people are agreeing with us that there is a systemic issue that is happening, and that our sector is so heavily tied to employments, to election cycles, right? And it's not neutral. It isn't neutral. So what is it, when we're talking about how might we make changes in the future, how might we look at something like this a little differently? All right. So we've got, pushing 80% of folks are saying 4 or 5. The second
someone
cause.
Said,
go ahead, Ange.
Someone's wanting to add narrative comments in Slido. So if you look in the chat, there's almost a swear word in Slido. Okay. In the chat.
Awesome. All right. Cause number 2, accountability gone wrong. So what has happened, all of you have moved to outcome-based models, right? Where there's this really very stringent focus on the outcomes that you achieve, the accountability that you bring to the table. Where it's gone wrong is it's not matched with increased flexibility. So the Auditor General of Canada in 2002 put out a paper called Modernizing Accountability in the Public Sector. And in it, the auditor says that increased flexibility is often provided in exchange for greater accountability. A move to greater discretion, flexibility, innovation is not supported by accountability that focus solely on complying with too many unneeded rules and procedures. Now, understanding the rules of accountability is actually really crucial and critical when we talk about our sector, because it gives us a good deal of insight into some of what's going wrong in our sector today. So the rule is that in exchange for greater accountability and more stringent and more specific outcomes, that we are in exchange meant to be given more agility, more freedom to figure out how we're going to achieve those outcomes, right? As long as those practices are legal and ethical. Now, I just want to take you through a ridiculous example. Let's say that Angela and I, we got a whole ton of money. We're going to hire all of you folks. All of you are professional bakers. You've all been highly educated. You've been in the field for decades. You guys are unbelievable. You have bakeries. You've owned them for years. Angela and I want you to bake banana bread for us. Now, we're going to hold you accountable that 80% of people have to love the banana bread. How hard is that going to be? Yeah, well, hold on, folks. We want you to use these exact ingredients. You have to have 3 quotes in order to procure these ingredients. We're going to give you a guideline with really clear instructions on how this banana bread is going to be made. So what ingredients you're going to use. You must use these types of oven and these implements, and that will be checked through audit, right? Can you demonstrate that you've used all of this? It's going to be baked at this exact temperature for this exact length of time. Can I now hold you accountable for that banana bread? So if only 60% of people like that banana bread, are you accountable? How can I hold you accountable? And I know this sounds like an outlandish example, but it's often the very same behavior that we see from government funders in employment programming. They want to hold you accountable with such precise and measurable outcomes, but then they shackle with unnecessary rules and processes that absolutely bury you in administrative requirements. Your ability to be responsive, to be flexible, to be nimble to changing populations, to local labor market conditions, etc., it's lost. You can't even evolve to economic conditions, right? These are the workshops that you must use. This is the needs assessment that you must use. And this needs assessment, by the way, is going to tell you what interventions you should do with that client. Here are the exact interventions that you must use, right? You must contact these clients every week. It's going to be scheduled right in there. And in this process, we completely strip your ability out of the process, right? We kill therapeutic alliance, right? We're going to build, you must build an action plan, but by the way, it's got to be on our system with these drop down boxes, right? I think many of you can relate to what I'm talking about. And what happens is a well-trained, highly competent, sometimes professionally certified career development practitioner is reduced to an automated robot within a prescriptive GPS navigational system. The other problem is that folks that are highly competent don't want to operate in this environment. So off they go, right? So this accountability gone wrong, not matching accountability with flexibility. Back on your Slido, do you see this as a problem? Scale of 1 to 5.
1, not really. 5, absolutely. And we've got thumbs up, 5s in the chat. Someone said you're on a roll, Sarah.
Just getting started.
Some people said, what happens if the banana bread burns?
Yeah. Well, then I obviously need to find a new baker.
Are the bananas ripe enough? Someone said.
Exactly. All right. So again, we're seeing that, like, what is this? 95% of people are showing that this is an issue. Okay. So just absolutely ironically, I have somebody knocking at my door that I'm going to ignore. Okay. So cause number 3, only winners get elected. So risk adverse governments do not make tough decisions. So because employment touches every aspect of our lives, employment and also unemployment is always a highly charged, top priority political issue. As the #1 solution to issues around crime, poverty, family stability, and the economy, employment is predominant in most election platforms and budget speeches. As a result, governments really dislike pulling funding from an employment agency. Who the heck needs that kind of front page coverage? So the first one, employment and unemployment, is always a highly charged top priority political issue. I've said that already. They really dislike pulling funding from the funder, from agencies. The other thing that happens is sometimes funders can be cautious to avoid appearances that they're giving favor to any one agency or any one type of service provider. So Angela and I have in some communities, seen where there's like 10 service providers, within 4 city blocks, all providing the exact same service. Some are profit, some are not for profit, some are colleges, right, et cetera, but they're all providing the exact same service. Really nice distribution across the different types of service providers, but has created this competitive environment where the funded footprint is now all wrong, and there's too many and there's too much competition. The opposite happens too, where there's nowhere near enough, there's zero competition, right? And the agency can actually cream. They're the only gig in town, and they have more clients than they know what to do with, and they can cream and achieve really great results. Sometimes we've also seen these untouchable organizations where they are they're these often very, very large organizations that are heavily supported, and they run all kinds of different government programs, and they become untouchable, right? And even if they are poor performers, and we've seen this where an agency has received, non-performance letters 3 years, 4 years in a row with absolutely no impact at all. And the problem is that when governments don't make tough decisions, and this becomes endemic, you end up with a service delivery network that is at odds with itself. We are no longer cooperating, right? Working as a sector that's really supporting each other. We can end up competing against each other. So again, quickly, only winners get elected, right? So do you see this as a problem, this risk aversion sometimes in government? How much of a problem do you see this as?
1, not really. 5, absolutely. And we see the 5s again in the chat. Lots of 5s for, yeah, lots of 5s and 4s, Sarah.
Yeah. All right. So again, it's kind of validating, isn't it, Ange? Don't you feel like we're like, oh gosh, wouldn't it have been awful if these were all zeros? All right. I'm going to keep us moving on to our next one. Same old program design, cause number 4. So in our combined 6 decades of experience that Angela and I have, new employment programs come and go. Even when they're presented differently, often what we find is that they're almost always based on the traditional job readiness model. So a traditional job readiness model is built for traditional job seekers. In this model, the vast majority of program resources are focused on building a better job seeker, right? So it's aimed at identifying and fixing the job seeker deficiencies and then supporting them to land their own jobs. Now, this works really, really well for traditional folks, right? It works for a very small population of people, however, right? The folks that have the skills and the experience and none or few of those employment perception barriers, we teach them how to fish and they are on their way. Yet the majority of job seekers who are locked out of the market because of market perception, because, you know, they are locked out because of market perception, not because of job search skills. They are locked out because they're non-traditional. And I love that thought, right? They're locked out because they're non-traditional, yet we're continuing to use a non-traditional model. They don't fit the employer's mental model of what is an ideal employee. How much more research do we need to do to know that the traditional job readiness model does not work for those most distant from the labor market? Now, sorry, I didn't mean to jump quite as quickly. So same old program design. Now, this one's a little harder, right? Because some of you have worked across all kinds of different program designs, but I'll talk just as people are answering this question. Oftentimes how this shows up is people will come to Angela and I and they'll say things like, well, employers don't want to hire those people. Yeah, that's the point. That's the point. The funder wants me to achieve all of these outcomes with those types of people, and it's impossible. Yes, it is. It is impossible if what you are doing is focusing on writing resumes and cover letters and teaching people how to fish for themselves, because there is nothing. You do not have a job readiness workshop that is going to make people more white, less physically disabled, older, or, you know, or younger or whatever. You cannot solve the isms that way. We cannot solve those isms by focusing on the job seeker, yet so many of our funded dollars are focused on the job seeker, right? So we're seeing the same thing, right? Where 85, 87% are seeing this as a problem. Last one, lack of service provider capacity. No, this isn't the last one, so I do have to pick up the pace. So as us as service providers, and again, we're not talking about you individually as a human being, we're saying across the sector, what we see sometimes is no professional standards. Anyone can call themselves an employment counselor, even without a stitch of formal counseling or career development experience or education or supervision. We are investing billions of dollars into employment programs with the genuine intention of trying to solve really complex issues for marginalized person, but sometimes we're doing it through a network that lacks even the most basic skills required to do the job. Right? What we hear sometimes is that staff don't have a professional practice. What they have is targets. They don't have a practice, they have targets. Targets to meet, papers to push, money to spend, statistics to compile. So in the book, we talk a lot about how do we invest in capacity, in building the skills that we need to really help motivate, help drive change with employers, like change things at a systemic level. Man, if we could do that with a well-written resume, that would be wonderful. Process burden. So this is where, as practitioners, right, you might have this caseload that's very large, working with very marginalized clients, but you have all of this unnecessary, unhelpful, prescriptive paperwork that drives out your good practice, low value, but mandatory activities that really leave no room for authentic work, right? The message is often clear in our sector: just get the number, spend the money, don't ask any questions, right? We get just shackled with all of this paperwork. Low wages can also be a really big problem in our sector, especially for the nonprofit sector, which can, of course, drive out talent. Poor leadership. So sometimes management is struggling to understand the competencies that are needed, right? They might measure the wrong things, or when you've got leadership that's just like, Angela, you got to give me some quick wins, Angela. Well, right? How do we get
Mhm.
out from that, right? So, they can't be blamed, of course, because they're struggling inside of a much larger issue that we've been talking about. Cookie cutter programming. Every client comes in, gets the exact same service, no matter what their needs are. I could open up 10 files, mix up the action plans, hand them back to clients. You wouldn't even know the difference, right? So there's not client-centered. Transactional energy leaks, where practitioners are spending all kinds of time doing job fairs and et cetera, access to the hidden job market. My job developer has 15 really great employers, right? And that's it. And somehow we're supposed to solve problems when we don't have our fingers on the pulse at all of what your employers actually need at a micro level. Poor business intelligence. We don't know how to use our stats. We don't know how to use our data. We don't have any business intelligence beyond what the funder is telling us to measure. So quickly, lack of service provider capacity. Do you see this as a problem?
It's a very active chat here, Sarah.
That's wonderful.
These causes have really hit. Some of the comments, I'm just seeing there's comments around employers and what employers need to do differently, and we need to be working with employers. Yes, we work so much on preparing and fixing clients. We have to do the same with the labor market, right? We have to
Absolutely.
support employers. There's like a pushing or a bringing together, and that again is what employment service providers are so important in bridging that gap.
So Wendy Sarah Delicate is definitely going to be taking at least 5 minutes over, Angela. If people have to leave, the recording will be available to people. All right. Cause number 6, myths and mindsets. Often unemployment is due to employer myths and mindsets, the isms, racism, sexism, ageism, ableism, etc. Job seekers with employer perceptions, those isms, need somebody to break into the labor market for them. It is part of the function of these employment programs, but oftentimes the problems themselves might be part of the problem, right? That we're using traditional models trying to get people to fish on their own when they can't possibly do so, right? We just need to make the client shiny and employers will hire them, right? So the other problem sometimes in this is government programs, marketing and sound bites can sometimes perpetuate these myths and mindsets themselves, right? We did a quick Google search on these types of programs, and sometimes it's like our program invests millions of dollars into helping people with disabilities confidently enter the labor market. And you just know that so much of that is reinforcing the myths and the mindsets. Sometimes we do it where well-meaning employment professionals reinforce those myths and mindsets when they present the profile of a job seeker to employers as people with complex employment barriers. But good news, she comes with a wage subsidy, right? We get in our own way sometimes, right? So this goes back to the last one that we talked about capacity as well. Job seekers with employer perception barriers, they need someone to break into the labor market with them or for them. And the myths and the mindsets that are out there have got to be dealt with, in a very, I want to say evidence-informed way, Angela, right? And there's nothing that's going to be done in a finely written resume that's going to do that. Myths and mindsets, do you see this as part of the problem as we are working towards achieving outcomes for those that are furthest removed from the labor market? Excellent. I'm loving that we have so many folks that are interacting. I'm also love, Angela, that this is across the country.
Absolutely. And beyond. We have some people outside of Canada too. And I hear Deidre and Paula and Serena and the people, in the associations that are working so hard on career development and workforce development saying they're going to be so happy to get all this data.
Yeah.
To continue the conversation.
Yeah, no, we certainly want, because there are many thousands of us across the country, right? How do we all come to the table here? So again, there's only so much of our book that we can present in an hour, right? And there's only so much dialogue that we can have, or conversation, if we call it that we can have when we have hundreds and hundreds of people in virtually. But we want to take a moment now to just reflect On a scale of 1 to 10, so these 3 questions are really important for us to hear from you on. On a scale of 1 to 10, how big a problem is the illusion in the employment services sector? So 10, very significant problem, 1, not a problem at all. So far, we've got a score of 9.1.
And 9s and 10s, Sarah, in the chat. Lots
Wonderful.
of 9s and 10s.
So
Not
even though that we
wonderful.
are pushing near, that's true, that's true. I know that some folks will have to jump off the line. We will make the recording available. The recording will be available anyways if folks want to share it with all of their staff widely. Like, it's for us, it's about how do, well, you saw those 3 things, right? How do we generate authentic conversation in a safe place so that we can start moving even just a little bit to solution? All right, I'm going to move us to the next slide. On a scale of 1 to 10, how ready do you think our sector is to talk about this problem?
1, not at all ready. 10 could be more ready.
Yeah, so
it's
on this
interesting
one,
seeing, Sarah, how this is shifting now. And we've had the 10s and now we're shifting over to the left side here. And I'm seeing 1s and 2s in the chat, saw 10, but 1s and 2s in the chat. And someone said, well, clearly we are ready to talk about it.
yeah.
And it says, it depends on who you're talking to. Management, staff may be ready, management, not so much. I'm just reading right over the chat.
Perfect, perfect. Right, and you know, the book has been out for a while now, and we've had many folks talk with us that say, like, I'd really like to have this conversation, but I can't, right? I'm afraid of what my manager will say, or what my funder will say, or what my coworker will say, or right. The thing is we're not at a place yet, and we're seeing that right now. Our score is 4. We're not at a place yet where we feel we've got that safe space to have the conversation, right? So how do we begin to start making positive change without having that authentic conversation, without having that safe space? So my last question, it's not entirely true. Second last question, what would need to happen to increase our readiness? So if folks could take a moment, and we would, you know, if you need to spend more time thinking about this and you want to send us an email, please do, because we're starting to work with all of the sector associations across Canada. And there are other countries on the line as well. This is not just a Canada problem. So what can we do to start increasing our readiness? And we don't just want to have the conversation in Ontario or just have it in Alberta. Like, these are federal transfers, gang, right? How do we have this conversation in a meaningful way? And it cannot just be done with service providers. Policymakers need to be in the room. Funders need to be in the room. Do we need politicians in the room? Who needs to be in this room? Look at these words, Ange. I'm loving this.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And
the biggest
thing
ones,
is,
look at this. Government's willing to hear us, transparency, honesty, support.
And the thing is, Sarah, when we're out and about, I mean, we see people are doing their best, right?
Yes.
We all have the same vision. Like, I would say governments, funders, policy people, service providers, managers, we all have the same vision as you and I do, Sarah, or I'll speak for us, of shared prosperity and inclusive and belonging and diversity and all of those things, right? We want those hidden workers to be participating. We want them because it's important for our country and our communities and families and individuals. We want that. But there are some systemic issues that we need to be talking about.
Excellent.
So we wrote a book.
So we wrote a book, but that was just planting a seed. Yeah. So in the book, we talk about virtuous survival principles, and it's about what is it that we could do, right? And man, wouldn't it be great if this was a book where you could just like scroll to the back and all the answers are like in the answer key? Remember that in high school? That was or public school, right? But there really is no well-designed performance measurement framework, no party promise, no government funding, no magical program design, no scathing auditor's report, no solution-focused training program, no agency certification program, no quality model, no single policy fix. We know that this is a complex issue and that it is going to take improvements in a lot of little different areas. There are some changes and some of them that are small that could be made that would make a really big difference, but they cannot be dealt with in isolation. It's all part of an interconnected system. So in the book, we talk about policy, practice, and purpose. We're not going into those today. Today was really just about saying, hey, Canada and beyond, we wrote a book. You know, Triple CD and invited us to say they wanted to know what's this book about and how do we share it and how do we have a conversation? How does it connect to the future of Canada? So this is really just a beginning, just a beginning. I'm going to leave this up. What 3 words stuck with you today, or what stuck with you today? Sorry. So in 1 to 3 words, use your Slido. What stuck with you? Paula, thank you so much for bringing us. Do you have any kind of closing words for us today from the Triple CD?
Just really wanted to thank you both very much for such a thoughtful and thought-provoking and positively focused conversation. We know there are challenges, but I think being able to bring everybody together to identify the problem, but also to think about ways that we individually can make small differences every day with the folks that we work with is really hopefully encouraging and inspiring for folks. So thank you both very, very much. On behalf of the Canadian Council for Career Development, I'd really like to thank you both for your time today.
Well, thank you so much for making it all happen, Paula.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Very, very happy with that. So just in closing, we would really love, actually that slide there, get social with us, right? Find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And what next? Please get working with your councils, with your community umbrella, your provincial umbrella organizations, such as the Canadian Council for Career Development, the Canadian Career Development Foundation, CIRIC, etc. How can we, as larger groups, start having this conversation? This recording, we're going to send it out to all of you. Please share it far and wide, right? How do we help folks understand that there is this kind of, now this is a shameless self-promotion. Please buy the book, right? The more people that read the book, the better. There are some free webinars on the website about it as well. And we're going to be at Connexus in January. So hopefully we'll see some of you folks at Connexus as well. But again, there was actually a slide, Angela. I don't know if we have it anywhere, but it's you and I on a limb, out on a limb, and kind of cutting off of the limb, right? So it's a kind of frightening place to be. So the more folks that we have that are saying, yeah, let's do this. Let's do this. I think the better it is for all of us. And any last words for all of you? I'm going to come back to this.
Yes, wonderful. Yes, so we sent this morning a handout that a 2-page handout. It was just a summary of what this call was about, what we believe in, the probing questions, some of the questions we asked on here during the webinar. Feel free to share that as well. We'll get you the recording. We'll resend you that handout. And I want to thank all of you for taking the time to be here today, to give yourself the gift of learning, but to give us the gift of your knowledge. And yeah, I really believe that social contract, Sarah, you know, we need to care for each other. We need to hold each other's hands through this crazy world. And I believe that this employment services sector plays a really, really important role for so many people that have been left behind for way too long. It's got to stop. And this is the continuation, maybe the beginning, and hopefully a continuation on how we're going to do that. Thanks,
Wonderful.
everyone.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.